Welcome to Season 5 of the Becoming Trauma-Informed podcast. I'm Dr. Lee, your host for the past 4 seasons, and I am delighted to announce the addition of a very special co-host, my husband and business partner, TLC.
To become trauma-informed is to understand how trauma occurs, why it happens, and how to respond in a way that leads to repair and reconnection instead of further pain and harm. One of the biggest causes and effects of trauma is history literally repeating itself. Whether it's toxic patterns passed from parent to child, repetitive wars, political discord, or simply the habits we keep participating in despite our best efforts, patterns are evident everywhere we look. One thing is clear. If our past painful experiences aren't discussed and processed, the harm doesn't just continue to affect us. It seeps into our relationships, our work, and perpetuates damage into our future.
On this season of the podcast, TLC and I will be discussing some of the most notable historical events in humanity and exploring what the past can teach us about the present, plus the potential impact on our future. We'll also be deep diving into popular trends and current events, exploring them from an intersectional and nuanced perspective. We'll focus less on finding the right answer and more on sparking curiosity and conversation. We're not going to sugarcoat it. The topics we broach will be activating, and the discussion will likely get passionate. We're leaving no stone unturned and publicly exploring the questions that most people dare not to even speak aloud. So if you're looking to learn more about trauma, to understand your own experiences deeper, or to dive into some slightly taboo conversations, we're excited you're here.
Let's get into it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode. We are so excited to be back in action recording. And you ready for this one, babe?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay, so we had a really cool thing happen where I had posted a video on TikTok, actually right after you and I had an argument that we had worked through, but I was still just like in my feelings and I was just thinking around some stuff. And I like paused and got regulated. And then I decided that I wanted to record a TikTok. And so I recorded this TikTok. It was like 9.5 minutes and I put it up and I was like, that was probably dumb. I don't know. I don't even know if I made sense, but I'm just going to put it out. And 5 days later, it had, 400,000 views and like thousands of comments. And we're going to actually play the TikTok right now for y'all so you can hear it. And then from there, we are going to go through the types of comments we got because we got a lot of comments. And
of all different varieties.
Right. All different varieties. But when you and I sat down to look at the comments, we pulled out some pretty distinct themes. So we pulled out some themes on the women's side and we pulled out some themes on the men's side. And then we pulled out some themes just like that I think are bigger threads that we wanted to tug on and see where they go. So just as a preface, this is a video about systemic conditioning, social conditioning in heteronormative relationships. One of the comments that we're not going to talk about, but one of the most common comments we got was people saying, I was not your target demographic, and why did this still apply to me? Or I was not your target demographic, so I wasn't going to listen to this. And then I got in and I realized this was my parents, or this is my sister and her relationship. Or so even the people who were like, this, I didn't think this applied to me, it did, or it doesn't apply to me and it applies to somebody that I care about.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty awesome. How many of those first comments were, oh, I was just hitting me. I'm in my early 20s, but yeah, this still lands.
Yeah. Yeah. So without further ado, we'll play the video so that y'all know what we're talking about, and then we'll go from there. Okay, to my hetero couples age 35 to 55. Yes, you built this For You page brick by brick. This has landed on your page for a reason. I'm about to fix your relationship, okay? Maybe not fix it, but at least tell you what the main issue is that you are having. And if you agree with me, I'd love to hear it. If you disagree with me, I'd love to hear it too. But at this point, I have talked to millions of people and I hear this over and over and over. And it's also what shows up in my marriage. And it's something that we've improved a lot. And also it still shows up because this runs deep. So as we grew up in this like older millennial, young Gen X, all the way down to the younger millennials, as we grew up, we were taught two things. Women were taught that their number one objective in life was to not be too much. And men were taught that their number one objective in life was to not be inadequate. So if you tell a woman she is over emotional, she's over controlling, she is doing too much, versus if you tell a man that he isn't doing enough, he is inadequate, he is unworthy, he is too small. Okay, so here's how this shows up in our marriages and in our relationships. So women, as we grow up and we are taught that we are supposed to try to be less than what we are, smaller, tinier, quieter, all of those things. We also got this very pervasive message on top of that, that we were not supposed to need men. We were taught that we weren't supposed to need men. We were taught sometimes even that men were bad, men were wrong, men were trash, all these things. And while that's not true, we were taught, like, you need to be able to bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan. You need to be able to make sure that nobody else, you don't need anybody else. And then men, on the flip side, in this age generation, they were taught that their self-esteem is based on their performance. It is on what they do, on how well they can do it, and on how manly and masculine they can be. And if they do anything that is distinctly female, if they do anything that is distinctly not male, that means that they are inadequate. That means that they are unworthy. That means that they are not measuring up. The issue is this. Those two types of people marry and partner very well together in the beginning, because this man who is so afraid that he's not going to be enough will oftentimes partner up with a woman who is like totally cool, not needing anything. And then on the flip side, it feels really, really great for a woman to partner up with a man who's not like telling her what she isn't or is doing wrong. So at the beginning, this works great. Except over time, what happens is that this woman who is having these controlling, pleasing patterns where she's constantly trying to ensure that everything around her is handled because she shouldn't need any help and she shouldn't need anybody else and she should be in charge and she should be like taking care of all the things. She is just being a mastermind, trying to manipulate everything around her and make sure everybody's good. And then we have this man who is loving and caring and really wants to be able to just be there for his family. A lot of times, about 3, 4, 5 years into this relationship, things start breaking. And the reason they start breaking is because needs aren't actually being met. Most women, all they want to know is that they are enough and that they are not too much. Most men, all they want to know is that they are not too little and that they are enough as well. And what happens is that our traumas start playing against one another. So what this looks like is as this woman gets progressively more tired, maybe now we're working, there's kids involved, there's all these things, and she's trying to take care of everything and delegate out and do the things, and she's delegating to her husband, and her husband is not doing everything that she's asking exactly the way that she's asking and the way that she's asking it on the time schedule she's asking it. And she gets frustrated because how is she supposed to take care of everything if he's not doing what she's telling her to do? So she starts giving him a hard time. She starts nagging. She starts doing things where she is saying things to him. And the subtle implication of that is you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough. Well, we just touched the core wound. So now that the core wound is poked in men start going, well, of course I'm enough, right? I need to prove that I'm enough. So I'm either going to fight back against this and be like, well, you are telling me to do things that aren't even important or don't even matter or whatever. Or they're going to shrink into a shell and they're going to detach, disconnect, shut themselves off because it feels too painful to stay connected. So we're going to see a fight response or we're going to see a freeze response. And then the woman in response is going to feel even more like she is too much because she's being told that she's demanding too much, she wants too much, she needs too much. Or this person, this partner of hers that she loves is pulling away, is detaching from her. And she gets the very distinct message of you were too big, you asked for too much, you did too much, and now you're losing love. So she either gets yelled at or she gets separation. So then the desire to control kicks in even further because now it's, oh gosh, I have to prove that I'm not too much. So let me make sure that I do more and put more on my shoulders and take on more responsibility to try to show everyone that I really do get to get my needs met. It really is okay for me to have things given to me in return because I'm taking care of everything. Don't you see how hard I'm working? Meanwhile, a lot of times the man is detaching further and further. And if this doesn't get corrected, one of two things is going to happen. One of these two partners is going to go, you know what, this is too much. And then there's going to be somebody over here outside of the marriage a lot of the times that kind of brings in this idea of, hey, you could actually get your needs met. You could be with somebody who cared about you in a way where you felt like you weren't too much or you felt like you weren't like inadequate. And then the end is usually near. Now, sometimes it doesn't get there. Sometimes couples just decide to live with this. And a lot of times people are deep enough in their trauma that they're like, oh, this is fine. I actually like this. It's okay. The guy will say, oh, it's okay that I don't really get to make choices, or like she's in control all the time. And the woman will say, well, it's okay because he does help. Like he's not like these other fathers who like barely do anything. He does do stuff. A lot of times this is where the sexual polarity goes away. This is where the roommate factor comes in. And this is where you're like, yeah, like I like them as a person, but this isn't somebody that I feel super intimate, super vulnerable, super close with. So what's the answer? The answer is that for women, we have to actually do the work to recognize internally that we are not too much. And men, they got to do the work from detaching and deconditioning from this performance-based self-esteem. Women got to learn that it is safe for us to take up space with our emotions and our feelings and feel fully and be our full selves. And a lot of times men have to learn, hey, this is not just about what I can do for people. My life is not just based on how well I can follow other people's rules and how well I can make sure that I'm not toxically masculine. It is based on what do I want? How do I want to show up in my life? How do I want to lead? And how do I want to take control of my life? And this is where the systemic conditioning really creates a problem, because if at the systemic level, we believe that men leading and men taking control is bad, and we keep putting this narrative out that women need to be the ones who are in control in order for everything to work, instead of actually looking at what does it look like to create an equitable partnership between these two humans where they, in their relationship, are allowed to decide what makes the most sense. They are allowed to decide within themselves what makes the most sense. Without doing that, this does not get better. This does not stop happening. And now a lot of us have kids and they are now getting into those tween, teen, even maybe adult age. And they've watched this happen for a while. So now they are doing one of two things. They are either going, ooh, I do not want to repeat that pattern. Or they're going, okay, well, yeah, like that's the pattern I'm going to repeat. So that's how trauma continues. That's how these things move forward. So I say all this to say the way that we fix this, the way that we shift this, the way we change this is getting really honest with ourselves around what did I learn about what it meant to be a woman? What did I learn about what it meant to be a man? What did I learn about what it meant to be in a relationship with somebody of the opposite gender? And yes, I know this is a very heteronormative conversation. I'm not including anyone who identifies as a gender outside of women or men just for the sake of this conversation, because that would just get entirely too complicated. And we've got to take it down to that micro level. We've got to be able to, within our own relationships, look at what did I learn? What did I watch on TV? What did my parents do? What did your parents do? What was modeled for us? And is that actually how we want to show up in a relationship?
So good.
Thanks, babe. I appreciate that. And I asked you, I had you watch the video before I put it up because I was like, is this good? Does this even make sense? And you were like, yeah, it does. This is good. So it was cool to watch your head nodding with that because I was like, okay. And no one can see you on camera, but I could see you nodding your head. So you want to go through some comments?
Yeah. Yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely can. I know you pulled a couple different ones. I had pulled a couple different ones out. Just
Yeah.
trying to hit some of those categories like you mentioned then.
Well, and our audience is probably on TikTok, our audience is, I think, like 80% women, 20% men, which I think makes sense because I'm a woman and I'm the one who's on there 80% of the time on my own. I'd say podcasts were around the same, like 75-25, 80-20. What we actually got feedback on is that a lot of women listen to our podcast with their partners and their partners listen in the background, which, hey, I love that. If that's happening for you right now, look at that. We know we're inside your kitchen or your living room with you. We know what you're doing. But I think we wanted to start with the comments from the women and then go to the comments from the men. And I want to do that for a specific reason, because I would say 95% of the comments we got, maybe even higher, were from women. So whenever we get more comments from a demographic than we know is the percentage of the demographic, what that tells me is that this is something that's like really activated them, really resonated with them. And something else that I think we see is that we've got to be careful with that, because I think we could have looked at the comments and gone, "Oh, well, see, this is primarily an issue on the man's side, because look at how many women are in the comments talking about how, unhappy they are, or how this led to their divorce, or how things really just didn't go the way that they wanted it to, how this explains their relationship so well." And I want to just presence this, and I think we can talk about it more when we get to the men's part, but that's not the full story. Sometimes you have people, just because there's a group that is talking a lot, it doesn't mean that what is being talked about only matters to that group or that part of the group. It's just that sometimes the other part of the group doesn't feel safe talking.
Yeah, and I think once it starts moving, it's almost like that snowball effect where you have, okay, am I gonna be the one guy to hop in here and be like, maybe I disagree, even with something small. It's we already know, okay, if the first 100 comments or whatever, if they're you only see women commenting, even if there are men interspersed in there, you're gonna be like, okay, I might be the only guy commenting here. How confident do I feel on that comment that that's gonna go over well
Well,
enough?
and that is that is a microscopic example of exactly what we just listened to.
Yep.
Of it, and I have been having this conversation now, like on Facebook and on TikTok and some other places, and this is something that has been hard for me to articulate. And I've actually had to have you talked with me a bunch about it. I've had conversations with several other people that I love and trust, trying to figure out how to articulate this. And so I'm excited when we get to the men's comments to talk about this, because I think it's really important. And I want to start with the women's comments because, again, that was the vast majority of the comments that we got. And we wanted to answer and like really reflect on those comments. So you read, I answer, you vibe.
Sure. Yeah, why
Okay.
not? Yeah, I got it pulled up here. So yeah, I'll throw in some commentary here.
Please do.
Um,
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing I wanted to mention is before this, you were like, "Is it okay if I ask you the women about the women comments and you talk? Is it okay if I put in commentary? Will people get upset at that?" And I'm like, right there. There's the conditioning, like you just described. Of is it okay for me to comment on something that's not about men?
yeah, and I will say I've noticed positive change wise. I feel like at one point it would have been maybe more so from a place of fear, maybe of being judged or of having, whereas now it's more of, okay, there's an audience listening.
Mhm.
And while I don't necessarily feel like I would be amiss to comment, I shouldn't comment. More so, I'm not trying to turn this into something else.
I actually see it as a protective move of you asking, will this serve and support our audience? Will this allow me to love on our audience the way that they deserve to
Yeah,
be loved on? Which is just, again, another like microscopic example of how a move from feeling inadequate versus a move from feeling love and care and like the desire to protect,
yeah,
they can look similar on the surface. And I think for women that's something that we struggle with, because sometimes we do not perceive that accurately.
yeah. I think one thing, to me, yeah, the difference between, as you said before, nice and kind.
Mhm.
You know, it's making sure that it's kind rather than unkind. Like that's more, going for that kindness factor. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I just makes my heart so happy. Like I just anyway. Okay. I digress. So I'm ready. Okay. So there's three types of comments, like themes that we pulled out. And the first one is around women who like really resonated with this and who are just like really struggling with what do I do, because it feels like I'm the only one who really cares about this.
Okay. Yeah. So So in that same vein, here's a couple around that theme is one saying, 7 years in, we've only been married 7 months, and I'm getting so exhausted. I just want to run away. And then another one, currently experiencing this. The struggle to reset, regroup, and rewire this mindset is tiring, and especially when only one partner recognizes the problem and the hard work needed to fix it.
Yeah. I think we had so many of those.
Yeah.
There were so many of the first one where it was this like helpless, hopeless, I don't see a solution, so I just want to escape. But you can tell that there's still hope there. Like it's like halfway hopeless and hopeful. I really do want this to work. And also just that first one of we were together for 7 years and 7 months in, I just want to run away after marriage. I think that this is a big thing because we were talking about all intimate relationships and marriage or the decision to be with somebody and only that person. Like your relationship is closed to one another. They're your penguin. They're your lobster. It's a lot. And so one of the things that I see is that and I think we had was just we don't know how to have conversations around container setting when it comes to okay, this is what is going to be inside of our relationship. This is what's going to be outside of the relationship. This is what my needs are. These are what your needs are. This is how we want these things to be and feel. And I I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing because you and we lived together for years before we got married. And the way in which we used to do marriage and do partnership up until somewhat recently, good or bad, there was a clear you are not together, you are together. And there was a lot of like contract and container setting to understand what was going to happen inside of that space. Now, I'm not saying what happened inside of that space was good, or a lot of times what happened inside of that space was incredibly traumatic because it was set on standards and expectations that a lot of times did not meet the needs of one and or both parties.
And
Particularly,
I feel like knowing that there's a container that needs to be set, I feel like it is one of those how long it ended up taking us to even realize there's a container to be set. So it's hard to set a container when you don't know. It's like you start really once we really started talking and realizing, oh yeah, there were these assumptions like you were mentioning when you get married. Oh, okay. Well, this is what I've seen other married people. This is what friends, media, whatever else tell me being married is. And not everybody takes away the same things from those messages. Not everybody has all those same things, but it's, oh yeah, when we get married, it'll probably be like this.
yeah,
And we didn't really even discuss that any of those happening, but it was just funny as we were been married years at that point, just realizing, oh yeah, I guess that was where I'd assumed how I assumed it was going to be.
yeah. I think one of the biggest fights that you and I had was when we were like talking about marriage vows and we were talking. I can still remember this. I can still remember being in the closet slash bathroom. And I think that was the maddest you'd ever been at me. And I was like, I am saying that I am so glad I married you. I am just saying that I never thought about what it would look like if I never got married. Like, I never questioned if I would get married or not, because that was an assumption that was like just put into my brain from the beginning. And I said, this whole idea of two become one, I don't like, isn't that codependent? Like, I don't even, and I didn't understand it. I was going through a block. I was in it, y'all. I was deconstructing my religion. I was deconstructing a bunch of stuff, right? I was questioning a lot of these things where I had entered into these contracts and these choices and these decisions without understanding what it meant to then be in that container. And I think so many humans do this. And we do it with jobs, we do it with parenting. People don't understand parenting.
Yeah.
And that
No,
actually and that is what when I see what one of the things we were talking about in that video is children There's a reason why when children become a part of the relationship, things go wonky
Yeah, you
because
think they're just, they're little people, but at the same time, it is another one of those things that I feel like you could try and describe to somebody in however long you want to take you hours. You could spend hours trying to explain what it feels like to be a parent. And
yeah.
then you become a parent, you're like, oh, okay. Even now I understand what they meant by that. But it's that embodying that actual words and being like, oh, so I do feel I would always struggle when somebody would say, "You're gonna feel like this," or "It's going to feel like this," and I'd be like, "Okay, well, that's how it felt for you. I don't know." And realizing, "Oh yeah, okay, they were actually right on that." Like, I didn't think I could love somebody like you love your kids. I didn't even know that was a possibility.
But coming back to this comment in the container setting piece, a lot of people right now, a lot of people in the comments were just like, I'm stuck in this container that I thought was going to look one way, and the rules changed, the game changed,
Yeah.
and I don't know, I don't know what to do with that. And then this second commenter brought in something that is slightly different than many of the other comments we got. And I want to make this distinction because you might, that second comment around when only one partner recognizes the problem, the hard work needed to fix it, that's going to sound similar to the comments we're going to talk about in a second. And they're different because there is a difference between it feels like I'm doing everything I can and my partner still isn't showing up the way that I would like them to. And it is my partner's fault that we are where we are. And the difference I see with that is it's the difference between an and a but. So these first types of comments, there's that confusion, there's that overwhelm, there's those negative feelings, there's that distance, that disconnect that's happening in the relationship. And this person is still, this woman's, I like my husband. I liked him. I love him. I want to be with him. This does not make sense because I know his heart and I know who he is. And so I don't understand why he's showing up this way. The second comment that we saw a lot, I'm just going to say it. A lot of them were mean. And I
Yeah.
don't mean like malicious. When we use the word mean, what that means is that there's no consideration for somebody's feelings in the short term or the long term.
Yeah, it sometimes made me wonder, I'm like, this is not only a public space, like, that you're leaving this comment on, but is your husband not on TikTok or the person you're in a relationship with? And I'm thinking, so not only are you saying that, but you're saying that with the knowledge that your significant other may also read that. So it's almost just made me go, that not only seems mean, but it also just seems, wow, there must be a lot of emotion behind that to want to put that out there publicly. Hey,
Yeah. And that right there is the trauma sensitive perspective. Can you just read a couple of these comments so that people have an example of what
yeah,
may I ask you to do that?
yeah, absolutely. Yes, the another comment here was, I watched the entire video and it explains exactly how I'm heading towards divorce. We tried couples therapy and he didn't want to do the work, refused to be honest and communicate his needs for 4 months, and then had the nerve to quit couples therapy because it was triggering. This video showed me that it takes both parties to rebuild, and I made the right decision to end it. I would have been alone in a marriage forever. Another one here is, stop nagging. 21 years. Done waiting for change. We're just roommates now. Another one is, this is exactly why I'm going through a divorce. My ex felt like I wasn't satisfied no matter what he did, but he did everything except for what I asked.
So they've already ended it or they have checked out. And I want to be so clear because one of the things that happened as we started responding to this is that people were like, you're blaming the woman, you're woman bashing, this is what this looks like gaslighting. This looks like what happens when a woman gets abused or a woman is harmed and people blame her. Y'all, This is episode, I don't know, 120, 130 some, I don't know where we're at. We're in the hundreds. I would hope by now, maybe this is the first time you're listening. I don't know. I would hope by now that if you have listened to us more than just for this, you would know that that is absolutely not our stance. We will never say to a victim that is actively harmed by someone else with malicious intent, well, but did you try? Stop. Okay. And we got to have a come to Jesus talk because I'm just seeing this way too often. And I think that and this is something that I haven't personally felt willing to like really go to the mat on until somewhat recently, because I'm starting to see just how harmful this is. There is a difference between feeling harmed and someone hurting you. I know it's super, if you just went, I feel, even saying it out loud, I'm like, some people aren't going to like this. There is a difference between you being harmed and you feeling harmed, you perceiving that someone has harmed you, and somebody actively trying to harm you. Okay. So if someone's not actively trying to harm you, we've got wiggle room. Because what that means is that this person still cares. There's still consideration. There's still love or affection. There's still connection there. Okay. Until someone goes, you know what? I do not care about how you feel. I do not care if you are hurting or not. I do not care if my actions are having an impact on you. In fact, I might do things that I know will hurt you and not feel bad about it. Until we get to that point, we've got space to work.
Or even worse, feel good about it. There are some people that is their intent, and they're happy
Yes.
when they reach that intent.
Yes.
But then yeah, that's a whole different story.
That is an entirely different story. And when we conflate those two things, we actually cause so much more hurt and trauma. When we go, it is the same if somebody accidentally hurts me or doesn't want to hurt me, but can't figure out how to not hurt me because they're so deep in their own stuff that they can't figure it out. That is different. Somebody not being able to stop doing something to hurt you or harm you is different than somebody choosing to do something to hurt you or harm you. The other piece is that it is a very, very, very rare case that things are 100% one person and 0% another. Now, there are plenty of cases where it's like 99.999 and point zeros and the other 0.001. Okay. So again, I know that this is, some people are going to get all heated about this. What I mean is that when we actually focus in on the fault, who's at fault? Who's hurting who? When we focus in on fault and both parties are not actively trying to hurt each other, we are missing, we're missing the boat.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting. I always think of like in terms of law and legal things. It's really interesting because a lot of people, if you were to ask them, somebody did something that ended up like in almost a chain reaction sort of way, causing the death of somebody. It wasn't intentional. What should the penalty be for that? People will say 5 years or something. But if somebody went through and intentionally did that, oh yeah, throw the book at them, whatever else. And people I feel are very understanding when it comes to incidences like that, or even like in civil law where it's normally, okay, something's 90-10, 80-20. And you're like, okay, yeah, see that seems reasonable. But it's so interesting how in other cases that tends to be like, oh, well, that's out the window. It's
Right.
if the harm, and make no mistake, it's not to say that when something is done involuntary, when harm is done to somebody, there still is within legal system, there is still a punishment for that because the harm is real. It's
Yes.
make no mistake, the harm is real. It's the magnitude of it. It just, I don't know. That's always one of those things where I'm like, people can seem to really understand it in a legal or in a sense like that. Whereas in a relationship, that seems a lot harder.
And I think that this is the reason why I wanted to bring this out is that I don't, these comments, I want to be so clear. I don't see these as mean from the sense of these women are trying to be malicious or they are trying to, they are like, I don't see it that way as all. There were some malicious comments. There were some intentionally, I don't care if my husband or my man gets hurt by this. I don't care. I don't care if he sees this because he should feel bad because this is his fault. There were a lot of those. These, it's a little more subtle. And so that's why I wanted to pull these out because when I heard you speak these comments and when I first saw them, I feel really sad because what I see in these are like women who are done trying and who have decided. So I want to pull out some of these words because we saw this a lot. We tried couples therapy and he didn't want to do the work. I'm going as if I wasn't already on a soapbox, I'm going to hop on a higher one. Okay. Most men don't want to talk about their inadequacies or their perceived sense of inadequacy.
Not a pleasant thing to discuss.
No. If you tell a man, "Hey, we're going to go sit on a therapist's couch for 60 minutes and we are going to dissect all the ways that you did not show up in the way that I wanted you to." They're like, "Can I walk on broken glass instead? Is that cool? Like, can I just yeet myself out of the car on the way there? Is that cool?" Like they don't, a lot of times women and particularly this pattern that we see, these women who are like, "I need to understand, I need to fix it, I need to control it." We're anxious to get this sorted. We want to figure out the pattern. We want somebody to tell us what to do. We want to be done.
And I would rather go, what is the best possible way to be done with this? And I do wonder too, sometimes in therapy where it's okay, I'm gonna say things that aren't nice, or I'm gonna say I'll do whatever. And then you don't end up doing it. It's yeah, because in part I was just trying to get away from painful feelings. I was trying but didn't feel otherwise. It's I'm gonna put a way of having at least some power in a situation where you're feeling pain, yet you feel like there's not really a good way. So yeah, sure, I'll do that. Completely spaced off some of the time. It's like I don't even know if you know what you're agreeing to begin with. It's
Yeah.
sure, glazed over.
And but that I think that this is the part that most people don't know. Talking about inadequacy for most men is highly distressing. And when we are highly distressed, we go into nervous system states of either hyperarousal, where we fight, or hypoarousal, like I talked about in the video, where we dissociate. And so, what a lot of women don't know, dissociation can be, oh, he's on his phone again, he's in the video games again, he's doing this. Dissociation can also be you just chirping in his ear and him being like, okay, yeah, absolutely. I'll take out the trash. I'll do the thing. Just tell me what you want me to do. Just tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it. He's not fully present when he's saying those things to you. He's forgetting he said those things to you because it seems like he's just calm and like not paying attention or not really interested. He's actually dissociated. And you used to do this all the time.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I could say from experience, there definitely times. Yeah. And it wasn't an intentional, oh, I'm just upset or whatever, trying to ignore it. Just like, yeah, like I could hear you, but the recollection later on,
Yeah.
I'd be like, even sometimes if you went through and asked me pointed, do you remember when I said this exactly? And I'd stop and think, okay, yeah. But for it to be in the forefront of my mind, that wasn't the case. It wasn't like a, "Oh, I know she wants me to take out the trash, and I'm just not gonna do it." It just didn't even pop into my head.
No. And I think one of the most damaging things that I did that I have thanks to trauma work and learning how to regulate my nervous system and going through the things that we have together And also the things that we're going to teach people in our Back from the Brink Masterclass, which I completely forgot to say at the beginning of this episode. So guess what, y'all? We're doing a masterclass on December 12th where we'll help you with this. It's $11. You and your partner, if they so choose, and if you have one, they are welcome in to attend. And there's a replay. So anyway, the most harmful things I did was I shut down, and I told myself, I'm shutting down because this is his fault. I'm shutting down because I keep trying to talk about it. I keep trying to fix it. I keep trying to address it. And he just checks out, goes and does whatever until he gets to the point that he's so annoyed that he yells and screams and says not very nice things. And then I cower like a little kid. And I then am like, oh my gosh, you're so mean. You're so mean. I can't believe you just said all of those things to me. It was such a great way for me to be able to not take responsibility for how I was really disrespecting you by not giving you space to breathe, not giving you space to make your own choices, not giving you space to, I don't know, not treating like you were another one of my kids, not treating you like you had the capacity to be a grown ass man. But I did that because of my social conditioning. I did that because that was what I was taught. Think of all the sitcoms we watched when we were younger. Think of all the things we were exposed to, like King of Queens, where he's just this helpless dude. And she's always having to nag him and teach him and mother him and do these things. Like when I think back to all of those sitcoms, Malcolm in the Middle,
Everybody loves Raymond.
Everybody loves Raymond. Do you want to know one of the ones that actually isn't like that and people had a hard time with was Roseanne? And it's
I was
funny
like people who really liked Roseanne and the people who really like Everybody Loves Raymond. I don't feel like there's a ton of overlap, which I've just kind of, yeah.
Well, and the thing of it is that there's actually like a comeback. Like I've been seeing this on TikTok and on social media where people will play episodes where like Dan steps into that energy of grown man and look, like I will be respected. And book talk. Goodness gracious, book talk. We book talkers, we are in love with these men who like do not take they love their women. They show up for their women in this way where they like deeply care about them and make sure their needs are met and all of that, but they don't take their shit. Book talk men don't typically have inadequacy wounds. And so there's a reason why so many women are like, oh my gosh, I really want a man like in book talk. Because it's this idea of, oh, well, then I could be with a man who doesn't have inadequacy wounds, so he could take care of me. He could meet my needs. And this is the thing that I want to invite other like women to think about, because this was a tough question that was posed to me. Would a book talk man want you? I know. I'm like, how rude. I had somebody ask.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't they mostly like princes, kings, maybe some anthropomorphic creature?
Yeah.
Who's a werewolf or a vampire who's super powerful?
Yes. But the thing of it is what I mean by that is not, am I enough or am I too much? Because a lot of women, if you were like me, your wound maybe got poked there with, oh yeah, no, I would be too much for him. I would probably really annoy him or like really irritate him. And the thing is we as women so often have been taught, you don't need a man. Like you get to pick the man, you get to do these things. And I just think that really hurts our men. It really, I remember you telling me that one of the most hurtful things I ever said to you was that I didn't need you. And I hear women say that constantly.
Yeah, it was almost, honestly, if I'm being real, it was almost surprising that it, at least at the time, like initially, that it bothered me as much as it did. See, there was a lot of maybe ideas and stuff like that that I had around things when you said that, and it's like, what? Yeah. More so than I would have anticipated.
Yeah. I was basically saying, I think I was hitting that wound and saying that you weren't useful. Like you weren't adding. And so, but I think that this is actually what's so fascinating. I think so many women who have that wound of excessiveness. And by the way, we had some comments say, well, what if I feel like I'm not enough and I'm too much? I find most women who feel like they or who have this traumatic experience of feeling um, not enough, it's actually unworthiness, not inadequacy. Those are different things. So inadequacy is I don't measure up. Unworthy is I'm too emotional or I'm too impulsive or I'm too this or I'm too big, I'm too whatever to be worth what it is that I want. So unworthy is actually oftentimes for women an excessiveness wound because it's like also my needs are too much. I shouldn't need this much. How many times have you heard me say that? I shouldn't
Yeah.
need this much. So women who have this women who have this excessiveness wound, all they want is to not be needed. Because what they've done is put themselves in so many positions that people need them to show up in certain ways or they don't work as a way to try to prove their worth and to prove that their needs aren't too much. And so they're like, if my husband said to me that he didn't need me, he just wanted me, like I would melt into a puddle of like just warm, soft, turned on goo. And
Yeah.
uh, I think the other thing that, so there is this, it is the man's problem. If he would fix his inadequacy, I would feel more worthy and I wouldn't be so excessive.
And I think that touches on, like we were saying in the video. Okay, well, if you just did this, then I could be in that position.
Mhm.
And back and forth, I feel like in a lot of cases we've seen like that's where it ends up going. Well, if he just did this, well, if she did this, and it back and forth, either side doesn't go either direction. It doesn't really solve anything.
Yeah. And here's the other piece though that I think is really cool. If you're listening to this and you feel like you've fallen into the second camp and you're like, they're shaming me or they're judging me. Look, I was you. So don't I'm not shaming you and I'm not judging you because I don't shame myself and I don't judge myself anymore. So if you are, yeah, if you're listening to this and being like, oh my gosh, like this just hurts so much and like how dare they say these things? I am not saying anything to you that I either haven't had said to me or that I haven't had to personally reflect on. I felt like I was already doing so much. And how dare somebody tell me that I needed to do more? Because I didn't have anything else to give. I didn't have anything left to give anyone. And in fact, that was one of the comments that we got that I responded to was around on a follow-up video. Somebody had asked it, she said, I feel like how do I do this work when I already feel like my husband's another kid, when I already feel like I'm mothering him, when I already have these two little kids, I don't have more energy to be able to devote to doing this work of fixing this. And what I said to her was this, I'm not asking anyone to expend more energy. What I'm actually inviting you to do is to give up a ton of things that you have unwittingly taken responsibility for that are not yours. The amount of mental capacity that's going to get freed up for you when you stop trying to manage your husband or your male partner.
And I love that. I love that right there because I feel like a lot of the times too, things that I've seen where the response to that question would instead be, well, you don't have the energy to not fix it because it's like it needs fixed. And if you don't, well, it's not going to get better. So like you can't afford to not fix it. I felt like so many times where I would hear that, I'm like, that's missing the point. I think you really nailed it right there where it's not just, well, just keep pushing. Essentially, what's implicit is that is, well, if you just keep pushing a little more, it will make it better and it'll make it worth it, expending the energy. And it's, yeah, tell that to a gas tank when it's out of gas. You're like, yeah, but the gas station's just like 30 miles further down the street. If you just push it there, I'll fill it up completely. It'll be fine. It doesn't really work like that.
Yeah. And I think that right there is why for a lot of men, therapy is such a struggle, is because you're asking them to do something that further depletes them when they're already depleted. You're asking them to talk about something that they already spend it takes an enormous amount of energy to be able to even try to find the words around it. And I remember so often could not find the words.
Yeah. Which is
Like,
it was something that was so weird for us because in a lot of different ways, when we would talk, I could lead I used to work for a museum and I would walk like somebody through the museum and showing them stuff and I could talk if they wanted to for hours on something, finding words. I know a lot of words that you're gonna find in the dictionary. I know words. It wasn't the lack of ability to articulate as much as it was an inability to just like, how do I even put this? How do I even describe what I'm feeling? And in a lot of ways, hadn't really thought about it in some ways. Not even like that it wasn't in my head, but I never thought to try and describe and actually speak it out. The idea of sharing feelings like that was not something that just came innately to me. That was something that I had to actually be like, "Oh, I never even really thought about sharing feelings like that because it was never something." Yes, you would hear people did. Men, there are some men, yeah, you would hear about them sharing, but that was never something you were supposed to do or something that was like, "Oh, good job sharing your feelings," and really opening up and being upset. It was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, that was a thing." It wasn't like a good thing.
well, and that actually leads to the two comments that we pulled out for women who actually came in and said, so some women came in and said, my relationship has never been like this. From the very beginning, he's loved that I'm too much, and I've always felt like he's more than enough and we're good. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, please share your secrets because what magical people raised you? What land of just gumdrops and rainbows did you grow up in that was the thing?" And I'm not being sarcastic. I'm like, "What? Please tell us what that looked like." Some people just that is something that works for them. They're not exposed to that societal conditioning from the start, or they've had parents who have done the work. They have good, like, positive role models. And that's why we do this work, is so that our kids can 5, 10, 15 years down the road be like, yeah, I didn't really have that because mom and dad showed us what that looks like. Like, you and I have had active conversations with our kids about what we've shifted. That's a testimonial in itself, is our kids have become different humans as you and I have done this work where they are so much more regulated because they're like, "Oh, mom and dad, they really like each other. They really love each other." In fact, sometimes we find them making out in the hallway and it's like, "This is gross." So,
I still love your response to that when one of the kids will come in and I'll be giving you a kiss. And they're like, "Ah," and I'm like, "Well, sorry, would you rather not have us never kiss? You want?" And like, it's like, "No, I guess you're right. Okay, fine, whatever." But mm,
I'm like, would you never do you want us to don't you want your parents to really like each other? Yeah. They're 12 and 14. I get it. That's gross. But and also you can see though, they like don't like it, but I think it creates safety for them. I know it feels a heck of a lot safer for them than us fighting all the time. So, but yeah, there were several comments of women who have never had that experience, and like their relationships have been really good. And they're like, I feel so sad for these people who have this because I never did. But there's a couple that we pulled out that I got really excited about. And will you read them?
yeah, yeah. So first one here being, we've been happy 25 years, but 10 years ago, I decided to let go and let him be the man I knew he could be. It has been the best thing ever. It allowed me to be soft and feminine and allowed him to be protective, supportive, and gentle. And we're happier than we've ever been. And then the second one here, my boyfriend does so much for me without asking, but I give him total freedom to be enough just the way he is. I've seen his mental health flourish. He also never makes me water myself down. I love it.
That when I read those resonate with the work that we did. Notice what both of these women just said. There's two words in both that I think are really big. So the first one said, I decided to let go and allow him to be the man I knew he could be. Now, I want to be really clear. The second one said, I give him total freedom to be just the way he is. Both of those, what those women are saying is, I accept my husband or I accept my partner for who he is. Like, I gave him freedom. I let him. Now, some people hear that and they're like, oh, that's still your control. I'm like, no, what I'm hearing in that is surrender of look. I am not here to turn you into somebody else. I am here to help you become who you want to be. Like, I am here as your wife, as your, it's still weird to me when people say this, but this is a personal thing. As your woman, as your lobster.
It's both lady. No.
Yeah, as your own lady. I was just thinking about all the terms we use, right? But I'm here as your love, as your wife to like to help you become what you believe to be the best version of yourself and to give you my opinion and to share my thoughts and my feelings with you when you are open to them. And to also like mind my own business when you're not.
When I think the thing that really almost, you know, is not said, but is definitely part of it, is when you can feel that being the case and you're like, okay, I can be who I want to be. And then you realize, oh, but the person who I want to be is actually, in a lot of ways, it is a good person. It is doing these things. It's always interesting to me. It's if you tell somebody, hey, I'm going to take 10% of all the money you get in and I'm going to go give it to somebody else, like an
Mhm,
attack, or you're like, versus you take that same amount of money and you go give it to charity, the difference that you feel goes to
mhm.
the exact same place, helps the same people, the result still being the same, but it's like the the level to which you wanna pay taxes versus the level to which you wanna give to charity and I can't speak for everybody, but at least for me, feels worlds different.
Well, one, one, you are obliged.
Mhm.
You are being subtly manipulated or like there's less choice. Yeah, you have a choice not to pay your taxes. The consequences of that are pretty gnarly, right? You always have a choice. It's just sometimes you don't have like you wouldn't choose every choice, but you always got a choice. The difference between I am actively choosing to do something because I know that it meets my wife's needs versus I'm being told that if I don't do this thing, my wife is not going to be happy with me. Her needs aren't going to be met. She's going to be really upset. And this is something that I had to learn and that was super tough to learn. We're going to have to make this into 2 episodes. It's just going to have to be
Mhm.
two.
Love it.
But I'm just having this realization of we're going to have to do the men's episode separate from the women's because this turned into, I love talking to you. It always goes so well. The thing I realized is that I was communicating wants as if they were needs. And I was communicating them in a way that it sounded like a request and it was really a command. So, what I mean by that is we have these three core needs. We've talked about them a lot on here. We have the need for choice. That is a need. We need to be able to choose, which is why when we subtly manipulate or coerce people into things, even if it was something they wanted to do anyway, it's why they get in their feelings about it because they want to actively choose. We have this need for psychological safety to feel like we get to belong, like we get to be accepted for who we are. And we have this need for physical safety where we have food and shelter and clothing and rest and bodies are protected. And there's a lot of different ways to get your needs met. And what I would do is instead of allowing you to have the choice to decide Am I going to be the one to meet this need for her or not? And how do I want to meet that need if I am the person who I decide gets to meet that need for her? I just I took that away. And so I was violating your needs by communicating my wants as needs and communicating them in a way where I made it sound like it was a question or a request. But in reality, if you didn't do it, you knew that you were not going to get accepted. You knew that maybe we weren't going to be as connected. You knew that I would like it. Well, oh, fine. You want to make that choice? Okay. Well, I'll make this choice later. You want to not take out the trash? Okay, great. Try to touch me at bedtime. See what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think too of when economics, there's this term marginal utility,
Mhm.
but it's the idea of what the last thing, how much it's worth. It's like to me, okay, like you were saying, there's certain needs. Okay, having a roof over your head, food, water, stuff like that. Within that, there's a wide variation.
Mhm.
If the importance being the level from a 3-bedroom house to a 10-bedroom mansion, if you need that 10-bedroom mansion, absolutely. But the difference in the amount of work, time, effort, everything else that kind of goes into that goes up in a very large way. And I think what's interesting is sometimes where it becomes, I have a number of wants and needs, and he's only meeting, say, in that case, 1 out of 10. Okay, well, that's true because that one need, the amount of energy and work it takes, I think a lot of those comments were, my husband, he doesn't seem to be doing anything. He's not getting anything done. Normally, I don't think it's like anything, but it feels like he's not doing anything. And it does make me think, how much of the time is it, if you've said all of these are needs, all of these are things that have to be done to a certain level. Okay, but there only is so much energy in anything. But in a person, to be able to keep going through and doing all of these. And it's, yeah, if all of these are to be met at X level as an absolute minimum, some of those are going to get missed.
Yeah. Well, and that is, I think, so key too, because I think this is a place that I didn't understand. And so I want to share because when you helped me understand this, it made such a difference closer to the beginning of our marriage. When because we had kids quick. So our first kid was born 11 months after we got married. The twins came a little more than like 2 years and a month after that. So we had 3 kids under 2 in 3 years. And so, yeah, that's weird math, but those twins make the math weird. But I remember you would come home from work because you were staying home with the kids. And I was working a really tough job. And I would come home from work and you checked 8 of the 10 boxes of like true needs for the kids, for me, for you. Like you did those things. But I had a list of 10. And to me, the 2 things that didn't get done just stuck out right away. And I oftentimes didn't see the 8 things that got done because they looked the way they were supposed to look. So my brain was so focused on what was wrong, what was out of place because I worked a job where I was literally supposed to notice what was out of place.
Mhm.
And after a while, I remember you saying, I just am going to stop. What is the point? One of the things you used to say during our fights that would just send me super far into dysregulation was, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're going to do what you want. Nothing's going to be enough. It is what it is. And you would get to that point when you were like, I don't have any more capacity. I don't have any more energy. There is no marginal utility here. Like there's no benefit to me doing even more than 0 because it doesn't, and I can do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It doesn't, unless I do 10 and do them exactly the way you want me to do them. It is like I did 0.
Yeah. And so it makes it so much easier to go, okay, well, if getting 6 done and getting 8 done, same level of you being upset,
Mhm.
okay, then I'm going to take that time that it would have taken me to do those extra 2. and put it into playing Barbies on the floor with the kiddos. And I don't think that necessarily was in my head. I'm like, oh, well, this is how it is. And this is what I'm going to do. I don't think it wasn't like it was a conscious thing, but it was like, okay, but if I'm playing Barbies and my kid is really, really happy that their dad's playing Barbies with them, okay, they're super appreciative of me spending that time. If I would have not spent that time and would have instead spent the time doing these other, well, you still wouldn't have been happy. So then, yeah, it was like that's when I would come with the, yeah, what is the point? What am I doing? Why?
Well, and I think that something that's just happened societally over the last several decades is dads used to really we used to talk about dads not spending time with their kids. Well, yeah, but a lot of and not always. I don't want to say not
Right.
always. And but like the idea that and I see a lot of women get really frustrated with this. They're like, well, he's just able I used to be like this. Well, he's just able to play with them all the time. And he gets to be the fun one. Do you remember Miss Doubtfire? Do you remember that
Mhm.
movie? I think about that all the time because when I was a kid, I didn't understand Sally Field and how she could be as upset as she was with Robin Williams. And then when I got to be a mom and got to be a wife, I was like, "Oh, I get why Sally Field's mad." Like he is and I bring that in because I see this with a lot of dads. What they do is they focus in on having fun with their kids because guess what? Their kids are a great place to not get that inadequacy wound poked because their kids really like them and their kids really enjoy being with them and their kids are excited that they're around. And I know just from our past conversations, that was a big thing for you is you leaned into the kids because you were like, the kids appreciate me, the kids respect me, the kids like me. You're talking to me like you don't appreciate me, you don't respect me, and you don't like me. So I'm gonna go hang out with them and prioritize their needs. And then I'd be like jealous of our or resentful of our kids, which I was like, this is a weird feeling because why am I resentful that my husband is making sure that our children are being taken care of and listened to and considered? This is weird.
Yeah, it's just really interesting seeing, looking back now and just recognizing some of the things now, learning as we move forward. What was going on? But yeah, it's like at the time when you're really in it, and I feel like anybody who's listening to this and doesn't, it's like when you're in it too, it is really hard to stop and then look at it in this overview kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Like at that time, neither of us could have articulated as to maybe why exactly. Like maybe if we sat down, wrote it all out, but that's not something you normally do. You don't know to ask the question.
Yeah. You needed to do work on your own. I needed to do work on my own. We needed to do work together. And that work has looked very different for both of us. And I'm excited. I'm actually excited that we spent this time on the women because on that side, because next time then we get to talk about the men and their side. And then I think there gets to be a part three looking at the more societal piece of this because there's so much here. And by the way, this is just like the majority of heteronormative relationships we haven't talked about. And this is there's so much more that goes into this. Like we haven't talked about the fact that both of our parents were still married.
Mhm.
That has a huge impact. We haven't talked about the fact that like how young we were when we got married. We haven't talked about our socioeconomic status. We haven't talked about the fact that like you and I are like straight humans. Like we haven't talked about the fact that there's so much more intersectionality and like how the not just the trauma we've experienced, but also the identities we hold in society that impact all of this. And so, yes, I think talking about this from the men's comments and the men's perspective and being able to offer the me, you being able to talk about that, me being able to offer like commentary on it. And then also going into all of those other pieces I just mentioned. This is not something that I think just sitting on a traditional therapy couch. I think therapy, I want to be so clear. I think therapy is such an important and oftentimes helpful modality to use. And there are so many other things that go into this and so many other places outside of that therapy couch that can support you in your healing. And I know for us, just understanding that this wasn't a you versus me thing. This wasn't like a personal thing. Yes, there's personal pieces and parts to it, but this was a pattern that played out in so many people who were raised like us. Even just having that understanding has made such a difference because it helps clear the shame. And I think that's why you and I decided to do this masterclass. When we were talking to team, we were like, we were planning on doing something else. And then we went, nah, we think this needs to happen right now. Because if you had told me, and I'm curious how you feel, if you had told me 2.5 years ago that this is where we'd be sitting, I would have had my doubts.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think, yeah, the idea of being able to express any of this, it's like until we really started being able to go a lot deeper, like you were mentioning with therapy. You talk what for an hour? Some of that being the thing, even if it's multiple days within a week, there's only so much time there. And a lot of that is being like, okay, I want to make sure the person gets to know what's going on or what I'm seeing from my side.
My
It's
side,
not
my side.
adversarial. Exactly. It's not even adversarial in the way that the therapist works. It's nothing to do with the quality of the therapist or the ability of the therapist. More so in that you only have a very limited amount of time and you've been together presumably for years with different things happening, trying to even condense that down into some ways. It's like it it's going to be very, very difficult,
Yeah.
even for people really wanting to try.
Yeah. And there is this understanding, and this is something that you and I went through, where when you have that person sitting across from you and there's two of you that they're helping, if we're take this way back to the beginning of the episode, if we are still in fault mode, the idea is that this person becomes more of a referee than somebody who facilitates communication between the two of us. And I've just seen far too many therapy sessions where one of my favorite people, I can't actually remember her name, but it's like couples therapy or something. I think it was on like Showtime or HBO. I can't remember the name of this woman. She's a phenomenal therapist, but like you watch her, she's having these like very deep sessions. And the way in which she shows up as a therapist is it is a masterclass on how to be a therapist, honestly. And I like you said, that not every therapist can do that. And a lot of therapists, it is tough for them to not bring their own bias in. And you get an out.
Yeah.
And that's not even an hour. That's 50 minutes. And then let's wrap up and let's book your next appointment and let's decide what our homework is. So really it's like 45 minutes, but it's not really 45 minutes because we're going to spend the first 5 minutes getting settled in and talking about what happened last week. So we've got like maybe 30 minutes in there of solid time. And I know for you and me, sometimes at 30 minutes, we were just getting in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to end it there, I think was really tough.
Yeah. And then have to drive home with the same car then afterwards. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
we didn't solve it. And this isn't necessarily maybe at least for us.
Yeah, and then by the time you come in the next week, you have all this other stuff. And
Yep.
so part of what we're gonna talk about in our masterclass is like what you can practically do, like not you don't not even with us, but like what you two can practically do to be able to have conversations together in a way that helps you like cross that divide and journey together and really get a better understanding of what's going on inside of your nervous systems, and it's going to be a lot about strategy and practice and things that you can do, because I think that there's so many books and things and they're like, oh, try this and try that, and I'm like, okay, also that's assuming I got time, money, energy, capacity, all these things like that. And there's three kids and there's jobs and there's parents and there's sports and there's work and there's all these things. And like, you are assuming I have the capacity for something that I do not have the capacity for. which is also why we have the 2-hour replay. And it's also why we put out a transcript. And it's also why we do the audio version so that you can listen to it while you're driving to and from somewhere. Maybe you listen to it while you're driving to the therapist. I don't know. Or on the way back so that you don't fight. I don't know. But we want to make sure that through this, you are getting tools and understanding better of why we are where we are. So, yeah.
I'm already excited. I know we've been talking for a while, but I'm like, all right.
I know.
So I know we're not doing it today, but also, hey.
I know. I'm like, we can do part 2 and part 3 right now. And then I'm like, our kids are about to come in the house. Other things are about to happen. So we're going to get part 1 out, and then we'll do part 2 and part 3, and it'll be great. Yeah. And if any of you have any questions or you're like, okay, actually, I don't just need a masterclass. Like I know that we need deeper help than this. Like we do have things for you. We have our trips program. We've got some things that would be really supportive for you. So if you would like to, you can just send us an email at hello@institutefortrauma.com, and we're glad to support you. And also the masterclass is an awesome place to start. Okay. Till next time. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of our podcast. If you've enjoyed what you just heard and you'd like to dive deeper into trauma and recovery work, come check out Trauma Club, our private membership community. It costs less than a therapy session, feels a lot better than a night out distracting yourself, and is built to be enjoyable for extroverts and introverts alike. You can head to jointraumaclub.com to hop in today and use the code BTIFAN, that's BTI fan, to save 50% off your first month. And if you want to talk to TLC or me directly, we would be stoked to hear from you. You can send us a quick message by heading to the show notes and clicking the Send Us a Text Message button. See you next time.